So, have you ever noticed someone anxiously defend a particular sequence of words with antagonism or even rage? Maybe even you personally. The anxiety of the rage is a type of fear, whether defending beliefs with an anxious rage, or defending opinions with a desperate rage, or defending any other sequence of words with a paranoid rage. The anxiety of rage is always frightened. So one sign of a superstition is that anxious rage. In other words, one sign of sin is that raging anxiety. Sin is a label for a mistaken perspective, as in missing the mark, or a misunderstanding or misinterpretation, or mislabeling. So if we were to use the label sin to refer to a set of several things, the first thing that we might emphasize as a sin is the possibility of misunderstanding the reality of the unity of existence. For those of you familiar with Judeo-Christian Islamic tradition, this is known as the first commandment. There's only one reality, which is continuous. There are not two isolated realities, such as the past and the future, or heaven and hell. There's a continuity of time, which can be divided with language for convenience into two segments, like the recent past and the distant past, but those two linguistic categories are not isolated realities, but just distinct labels for a single continuous reality. The distant past, the continuous past, the distant past, and the near past, the recent past, those are all continuous together. They can even overlap. We can have categories like last decade and then the period 2002 to 2004. They're just segments of reality. So there's a continuity of existence which ranges from heaven to hell as well. But they're not literally places. The myths or words of heaven and hell as places are useful metaphors like all other words. They're symbols. However, even when we refer to two different places, such as Arizona and America, those two different places are not two independent realities. Those are two labels for the only reality, which is a single continuous reality. So the first thing we might emphasize as a sin is the possibility of misunderstanding or simply not recognizing the reality of the unity of existence. Arizona is not a different reality from America. Arizona is within America, but so is Alaska, at least since 1950 or whatever. So America is a made-up label anyway, Alaska, Arizona, those are made-up labels. So even though Alaska is very different from Arizona, they are still two valid labels for different portions of the same continuous reality. There's only one reality. In fact, there's only reality. There's nothing else but reality. That's the first commandment. It's not mysterious. And someone who doesn't understand the reality of the first commandment, so-called, would probably say something else about the first commandment. They wouldn't say that. They'd say something else because they don't know the reality of what the first commandment refers to. So reality is singular, but there are many labels for it, many words in it, many names of it. All of the languages are language. All of language is an aspect of reality. There's not the separate reality of language and then all the rest of reality. There's linguistic reality and physical reality. And when we refer to linguistic reality, we're talking about metaphysics or spirituality. Well, I'll come back to that later. So reality is singular, but there are many labels for it, many words in it, many names of it. Name one name that is not a name for reality. Name one word that is not a word for reality. Name one label that is not a label for reality. It can't be done. Everything refers to reality. It's a single, continuous unity. For instance, consider the words God, Allah, Yahweh, and Brahman. In different languages, different words may reference the same idea or same linguistic distinction, same concept. Likewise, someone can write the word Allah in Arabic or in cursive or in Arial font or in New Times Roman font or in bold print or in italics or in black ink or in colored ink, and yet it's still the same word, Allah. Someone can pronounce the word with an accent, Allah. I don't know if that's a good accent. Pardon me. Forgive me if I'm pronouncing it wrong. All right. So someone can pronounce the word Allah with an accent, or say it with a high pitch Allah, or a low deep tone of voice, Allah. It's still Allah. A little kid, Allah, la, 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 la. They can just be making noise as an infant, as a toddler, and not know what those sounds are. That's still the word Allah. It may not indicate any comprehension when a toddler goes la 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 la, but that's a really easy thing to do with one's tongue, and that's part of why the word Allah is considered such a basic sound, kind of like the word Om in Sanskrit, Om. So we might list 10 or 100 or 1,000 or 57 million ways to say or write the word Allah. In fact, every time the word Allah is used, that's a new occasion of that word Allah being used. However, Allah is still the same word, right? There's a continuity, a singularity. Allah is always Allah. Reality is always reality. Likewise, no matter how many words are used within reality, reality is still a singular, continuous unity. There are many labels for the singular, continuous unity of reality, which have been represented in different languages using different words, such as Allah in Arabic, Brahman in Sanskrit, Yahweh, a variation of Hebrew, and God in English, or Goth and Gut, and the European origins that became the English word God. So many people may misunderstand those words and just superstitiously worship the individual words in a particular language, such as a word in Hebrew or in English or in Arabic or in Sanskrit. That is completely understandable error or stage of development. It's totally innocent. In fact, making that error may be practically essential in order to recognize the fact that it is an error to worship a particular word or sequence of words. Or a stage. We could even say it's a stage instead of calling it an error. But it's not a comprehension of God to pronounce the word God. That's just pronouncing the word God. So we'll move on to a few popular superstitions in a moment. Okay, a few popular superstitions. First, there's the idea that the world is flat. As a sequence of words, that grammatical construction is quite valid. The world is flat. In fact, many parts of the earth are quite flat, and because of the limitations of human visual perception, it's quite natural to label the earth as flat. Standing on the surface of the earth at a height of maybe 6 feet, human eyes and brains interpret the earth as flat. However, from the top of a very high mountain, like 10,000 or 15,000 feet, it's possible to directly see the curvature of the earth, looking, out in the horizon if there's not a bunch of trees blocking your view. If you're really at the top of like a piece of rock kind of mountain, not a mountain covered with trees at the top, but a piece of rock kind of mountain at the top. Look around, you can see the curvature of the earth, like if you were flying high in an airplane. You can still see the curvature of the earth. Or if you're even far away from the earth in a satellite in orbit around the earth, it'd be real easy to see the curvature of the earth. You could see even, from a certain distance, you can see the entire circular sphere of the earth, and be really clear. It's round. It's not just a two-dimensional circle. It's actually like a ball. So quite plainly, the earth is not actually flat, but it does appear flat from a certain perspective. In certain places, totally valid to call it flat. Labeling the earth flat is quite natural, though technically imprecise. There's a picture of Hecataeus, whatever his name is, the map that he published about 2,600 years ago. A map of the known world. a flat map of the known world. The known world meaning as much of the world as he personally knew. Not a whole lot of it, but for 2,600 years ago, a very big map, really. That's bigger than you can see from the top of a mountain, right? So, just because someone is using a conceptual model that's flat, like a flat map, as distinct from a spherical map of a globe, that use of a conceptual model that's flat doesn't prove that the planet is flat or the thing being modeled is flat. Also, just because someone uses an Arabic word or a Sanskrit word for the singular boundless continuity of reality, Allah or Brahman, that does not mean that the only valid way to label reality is that particular language. It can be done in Hebrew, Aramaic, Greek, English, Spanish, Sanskrit, Arabic, whatever. So pronouncing a word in a recognizable way does not establish comprehension. I can properly spell and even recognizably pronounce the words calculus, Sanskrit, dimethyltryptophosphate, but does that make me an expert in those subjects? It doesn't, does it? Further, pronouncing the word Allah, I just made up dimethyltryptophosphate. I don't even know if it's real. I mean, it's a real word in the sense that I just made it, but is it a real substance? I'm not sure. Maybe it'll be discovered eventually, I'm not sure. Further, pronouncing the word Allah or Brahman or God does not prove comprehension of the ancient primary meaning of those words. Even parrots can pronounce those words, even the bird parrot. Even a toddler can say Allah, la, la. Even a 3-year-old in Sunday school can sing those words in pretty songs. Even ignorant, arrogant, anxious, raging preachers can pronounce those words, sometimes very loudly. And that reminds me of trying to effectively communicate to a deaf person by shouting. When the blind lead the blind, that's a lot like someone who does not comprehend the Sanskrit language trying to teach Sanskrit. Then all the students complain that Sanskrit is gibberish and very hard to learn. Why? Because they're learning, the person attempting to teach it doesn't understand it. So someone who's not competent in the field of Sanskrit cannot help people be competent. Similarly, someone who's not competent in the field of spirituality cannot help people to be competent in spirituality. What is the field of spirituality? It has to do with metaphors. It has to do with analogies. It has to do with proverbs and language. Spirituality is simply the comprehensive study of language. That's how I'm defining it. There's a map of the known world, or the real world as known by Ptolemy. That's his best geographic estimate of the Mediterranean area and then into the Indian Ocean. And that's all he knew about. So that's what he put on his map, and the map's not precise. It's not as accurate as some later maps, but it's again pretty darn good, pretty darn close. Can't make that from just looking at a mountain. That takes a whole lot of work to make a map like that. A lot of people have to cooperate. So we'll get on to sin in a moment. What does that mean?